Thank you all for joining us today. The Law Firm Sustainability Network is excited to support the Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization project. In addition to our authors today, we have a fantastic group of panelists who are going to explain the project and talk to you about how you can also participate. Right now, I'd like to introduce you to Steve Harvey, who is the partner and head of Steve Harvey Law, and is also head of the nonprofit group Lawyers for Climate Actions. I was very lucky to meet him a few years ago, and they're doing some really great work and getting lawyers involved. So, Steve.
Thank you, Gayatri, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I remember first hearing about climate change when I was in law school. I think it was 1988, and I know it was James Hansen's testimony to Congress. And I was struck by that at the time, and I spent some time over the years worrying about it. And as the story continued to build through the 1990s and the 2000s, but I didn't do anything about it until I started my own law firm in 2013. And then I started reaching out to other people and other lawyers to discuss this grave concern of climate change and what we could do about it. And so a group of us came up with the idea that what we can do is we can engage the legal community, which is the community. I thought that made sense. I still think it does, because as lawyers, it's the community we know the best. It's a powerful community. It's an influential community. We should be able to make a difference if we do nothing but convince other lawyers. And so I started this organization with others. And our name was originally, now we're Lawyers for Climate Action, but originally we were called a call to the bar, Lawyers for Common Sense on Climate Change. And the common sense came from Thomas Paine and the Declaration of Independence, which says that we have these inalienable rights, but government exists to secure those rights. There's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so the fundamental idea is that we've got to encourage our government to do its most basic job and protect us. We had a pretty good run from 2014 to 2019. We had a series of national conferences. We had much networking, and it included many of the people on this call. And we unfortunately lost a little momentum in the last part of the last president's administration. Not a great time to get jazzed up on climate activism, but now we're getting into a much more auspicious time for lawyers to get engaged again. And I can't think of a better way to do it than by promoting legal pathways to deep decarbonization and the pro bono opportunities that are available to lawyers through it. I also want to say that Lawyers for Climate Action is looking to move forward, and I'd like to hold a Zoom call on June the 2nd at 5 p.m. If you would like to attend, I'm Steve at steveharveylaw.com, and if you let me know, I will include you on the Zoom invite list. And among other things, we're going to be talking about getting some new leaders and some new people involved as we move forward. In the meantime, enjoy this wonderful program, and our next speaker is Mike Gerrard, who's a longtime practitioner of environmental law with the Arnold and Porter Law Firm, as well as a professor at Columbia Law School and the Sabin Center. One of the great things about getting involved in climate action is you get to meet the most wonderful people who are very accomplished and will give up their time to work with you on this important subject. And Mike Gerrard is one of those people. Mike?
So about 8 years ago, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, based in New York, and a group in Paris called IDRI, launched the Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project. Its purpose was to develop national pathways for the 16 largest emitting countries in the world that together amount to about 3/4 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. This is a project that was undertaken under the auspices of the United Nations. In 2014, the group released its book, Pathways to Deep Decarbonization in the United States. And it had 4 pillars. First, electricity decarbonization, which involved moving away from fossil fuels to make electricity and moving almost entirely to wind and solar. The second pillar was energy efficiency, trying to make all the equipment we use as energy efficient as possible. The third is electrification, moving our vehicle fleets to electricity, moving building heating and cooling and water heating and as many other things as possible to electricity. And fourth, carbon capture, both at the source, the carbon capture and sequestration, and direct air capture from the atmosphere. The technical study also talked about avoiding emissions dead ends, avoiding, for instance, conversion to natural gas, because although natural gas emits less than coal, it still is an important fossil fuel. The technical report also assumed that or mandated as part of its pathway mission, having the same level of electricity reliability. It assumed that we would continue to have population growth and economic growth in the United States. Importantly, it assumed that people would not need to get rid of their cars or their appliances prematurely, but when it came time to get a new car or to get a new boiler in their house or hot water heater or appliances, they would go to electric vehicles, electric appliances that are as efficient as possible. The study showed the need for a tremendous increase in wind and solar generation, because we would be getting rid of all the fossil fuel electricity generation. The nuclear power plants are getting old and will be retiring, and there's a tremendous increase in the need for electricity for vehicles and electrification, all other things. So this technical study had a large number of very specific recommendations. John Dernbach, a professor at Widener Commonwealth Law School in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I were at an environmental law conference together. We discovered that we were both admirers of this technical study. And we also said it would be great if somebody were to answer the question, how does U.S. law need to change in order for the U.S. to be on this decarbonization pathway? Federal law, state law, local law, and private governance. So after some further discussions, we decided to try to answer that question. And that led to the book project that John is now going to describe.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. As Michael indicated, I teach at Widener Commonwealth Law School in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book. We decided to find authors on specific topics who had deep expertise in those topics. We divided the deep decarbonization puzzle in the United States, the legal puzzle, into about 36 different chapters requiring as many authors or author teams. And when the book was finally done, we found we had about 1,500 recommendations for federal, state, local law, and for private governance. The book itself is quite a large book. I think you can see it here. We're really proud of all the work that was done. That's the large version of the book, and we also published a shorter version of the book, a summary and key recommendation version of the book, which you can find for free online. One of the things that was important to us, I think, is we looked over the recommendations in the book, was that they're not limited to environmental law or energy law. There are recommendations with respect to property rights, insurance, infrastructure, and in all manner of other areas of law. And that's particularly relevant for this project, because you don't have to be an environmental or energy regulatory sort of lawyer in order to make a contribution to this project. We have people who, with a wide variety of backgrounds who are making contributions to this wide variety of fields of expertise. And the reason is that the laws that we need are going to involve pretty much every area of federal, state, and local law, every area of expertise. Just a couple of just a short summary of the chapters themselves. We had 4 chapters on energy efficiency and conservation. This is appliances, new and existing buildings. In the industrial sector, we have 5 chapters on transportation, basically cars, planes, trucks, trains, and ships. are all covered in separate chapters. We have a great many chapters in the book on electricity decarbonization. Some of them you might guess, large-scale renewables. Michael wrote an excellent chapter on that. Distributed renewables, rooftop solar, for instance. Transmission and distribution, which are important. Nuclear, hydro, and also a chapter on phasing out fossil fuels. We have a couple of chapters on fuel decarbonization, particularly liquid fuel decarbonization. As you might guess from the corn ethanol issue, a lot of that is about sustainable production and what particular uses liquid fuels that are made from renewable sources should be made from. There's 4 chapters on carbon capture and negative emissions, which is important because reducing greenhouse gases by itself, probably even to zero, probably isn't going to do it. We're probably going to have to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. I think we're all mindful of the fact that carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere now are higher than they've been in 3 million years. That's probably not something that we want to have continue for a long period of time. There's also chapters on non-carbon dioxide pollutants, black carbon, methane, fluorinated gases, and nitrous oxide. And we have a suite of chapters on cross-cutting approaches, including carbon pricing, a chapter on behavior, 2 chapters on finance, chapter on consumption, and even a chapter on international trade. When we got all done, we put together an index of recommendations by actor at the back end of both books so that anybody who's working at a particular level of government or in a particular place can see all of the recommendations that apply to them without having to go through the entire book. But the question that was important to us was not just how to get these recommendations out there in a book, but how to get them enacted and how to get them turned into model laws. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick Horsch, who's a retired environmental law partner at White and Case, and who's been doing quite a great deal of very, very good work on this. And the one thing I want to just say before I turn it over to Rick is that the ABA section on environment, energy, and resources has endorsed the implementation part of this project as a pro bono project. They've actually got it on their website, and it's been approved by the American Bar Association. So not just the law firm Sustainability Network with Gayatri, but also the ABA has its imprimatur on what you're about to hear. So I'll turn it over to Rick.
Well, thank you, John. As John indicated, I practiced law at White and Case for well over 30 years, and I'm now retired, although spending much of my time on this project, which is really of quite value and has been a lot of fun. I'm going to provide you with an overview of the project. I'm also going to discuss the drafting process, and I'll also describe how lawyers, you, can participate in the project. As John explained, in each chapter of the book, there are recommendations for actions that legislators can take to address climate change. And those actions can be at the federal level, at the state level, at the county, and at the local level. And on average, each chapter has about 35 to 40 recommendations. Set out on this slide are examples of recommendations from the book. There are recommendations for actions at the state level. For example, states can ensure that each energy customer may purchase clean energy from local energy providers through its own or the provider's distribution system. Also at the state level, states, for example, should consider adopting legislation and programs that encourage the use of energy efficient appliances and equipment through tax policy, financial incentives, labeling programs, and financing policies. There are also recommendations for actions that cities can take. For example, cities should adopt and fully enforce city building energy efficiency codes. There are actions that local governments can take. Here are 2 examples. I'm not going to read them, but you can see recommendations certainly at the local level. And then finally, I'll end with the recommendations for actions by private actors. I've included one here. What I'm trying to do here is give you a feel for the recommendations that are in the book. I mentioned state, I mentioned city. Here are two local recommendations out of some 1,500. And then, of course, there are recommendations that private actors such as companies can take. Here I've selected one: companies with high shipping volumes can impose supply chain requirements such as only moving their goods on ships that meet a certain efficiency standard, use low carbon fuel, or slow steam. So Gayatri, next slide, please. So what the project aims to do is to turn these recommendations into model laws that can be adopted by legislators with some tweaking on their part to adapt those laws to their jurisdiction. And when I say model laws, I would include model legislation, regulations, best practices. There are standard operating procedures, and there are model lease provisions. The type and scope is quite broad, and this is the core of the project. We don't want the book and its recommendations to just sit on the shelf. We want to bring the recommendations to life in the form of model laws. Each draft of a model law goes through a peer review process before it's made available to policymakers, and you're going to hear more about the peer review process from Marcy Khan. The project has a website that serves as a central location for the model documents and allows legislators to access those documents. We launched the website in April of 2020. I've provided the website link there. We're coming up to its 1-year anniversary. So break out the champagne, I suppose. Finally, the final step is reaching out to policymakers to ensure that there's a demand for these model legal documents and that they will be adopted. And we're actively reaching out and connecting with legislators and policymakers at all levels of government to let them know about this resource. We have a 3-person committee coordinating that effort, and you're going to be hearing more about outreach from Carla Perry. The slide you're looking at here is a diagram of the drafting and peer review process. A couple of points. Step 1 at the top, the drafter reviews and selects a recommendation from the book, undertakes basic research, and where appropriate, consults with the chapter author. Step 2, we suggest that drafters prepare a template. It's really a 1 to 2 page summary of what the drafter prepares to do, including the nature of the law that's going to be drafted. The real purpose of this template is to focus the drafter before they begin the actual drafting process. And then I've listed step 5. Obviously, the final draft model legal document is reviewed, is drafted. Once it's drafted, it is peer reviewed, and then ultimately it is posted to the website. What I've outlined here or tried to diagram is how the process works. As you can see at the top, the model document is prepared. It then gets posted on a website. We make those documents available to NGOs, to law firms, and other intermediaries. By intermediaries, I mean those who have contact with legislators and other policymakers. And of course, we policymakers and legislators will have direct access to it. We are encouraging legislators, NGOs, and others to give us feedback on what they're looking for and how we might improve the process. So where are we today? To date, more than 24 law firms and a number of individual attorneys, law professors, and retired judges are participating in the project on a pro bono basis. We currently have nearly 40 model laws that have been drafted, peer-reviewed, and made available on the LPDD website. So, how can you participate? If you are a law firm or a member of the law firm, you can take responsibility for a chapter or topic, select and prioritize the recommendations, and draft the legal documents. Or if you don't want to bite off so much, you can take responsibility for one or more recommendations in a chapter. That's what most firms and lawyers are doing. While we have a number of firms who are already participating, we still have a number of recommendations and chapters that are available. Some firms have lawyers who have qualified for peer reviewing, and we have a handful of lawyers from law firms who have relationships with state houses or other legislators who can assist us in reaching out to legislators and policymakers. If you are an individual attorney or in-house counsel or law professor, again, drafting is certainly a real possibility. Depending on the level of expertise, you can assist in peer reviewing, and again, based on the nature of your relationships with state houses, legislators, or others, you may assist in outreach. If you are a member of an NGO or civil society, you can work in the same role as a law firm and as an individual attorney. But what we have found is that NGOs tend to have their thumb on the pulse of what's happening at the legislative level, and a number of NGOs we're working with to assist in outreach. Here is my contact information. Please contact me if you would like to get involved. Marcy Khan will now tell you about the peer review process. Marcy is a retired justice from the New York Supreme Court, Appellate Division, First Department, and has been just terrific in organizing and managing the peer review process, among other things. So, Marcy, take it away.
Great. Well, I'm delighted to be part of this seminar today, and I'm very excited to be part of the Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization project that I've been working with now for about a year and a half since my retirement from the bench. I've learned a great deal from the people you've just heard from who have put together a fabulous project. I'm going to talk about the peer review as we've said, and the work product that we put together and post on our website and take to legislators is of the highest possible quality. So who are these peer reviewers? Well, we've recruited more than 40 experts in the various pathway fields you've heard described in detail by John and as set forth in the book, who have deep involvement in their fields and have volunteered to serve as our peer reviewers of the drafted model documents. They include law professors, industry lawyers, financial experts, climate advocates, people from NGOs, present and former government officials, engineers, and a number of the chapter authors themselves. You'll hear from one of them in a little while, from Romany Webb. Now, what are the goals of peer reviewing? Well, we have 4 principal guidelines in order to achieve our goal of getting the best possible work product. First, we follow the recommendations of the LPDD book, which in turn follows those technical recommendations that Michael described to you from the U.S. Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project. We are not generally asking peer reviewers or drafters to propose new policies that do not appear in the book. We make an exception where drafters or peer reviewers feel that an alternative must be explored, and then it may be added to the presentation and compared with the original proposal. Second, we strive for proposals which would have a significant impact on decarbonization. Third, we seek to offer proposals which have some political viability as legislation. We are not interested in recommending options which have repeatedly been rejected or have been thoroughly overtaken by market or political events. And fourth, our peer reviewers are encouraged to take a common sense approach and work toward enhancing the proposal as provided by the drafter. We discourage efforts to reinvent the wheel. As Professor Dernbach says in the introduction to the book, the objective is not to identify the one best legal approach or set of approaches, but to identify the broadest possible range of approaches to deep decarbonization so that public and private decision makers can better understand the wide range of available choices and can choose those legal pathways that they believe are appropriate or feasible. So how does the peer review process work? Well, we have a protocol for our peer review. It provides that upon completion of the drafting process, the drafter sends the following documents to the project coordinator of drafting, that's Rick, and to the coordinator of peer review, that's me. The draft model legislation gets sent. Also, for more complex measures, we ask for an annotated version of the draft model legislation, which explains how each section fits within the overall policy scheme and how it differs from existing or pending legislation. And they also send a legal memorandum discussing the legal background for the legislation and making the case for its adoption. After the coordinators review, the documents are assigned for peer review. In some instances, we may have more than one peer reviewer assigned to a project. We encourage the peer reviewers and the drafters to communicate directly during the peer review process. We find that that saves time and involves a better outcome. Occasionally, we have asked a peer reviewer to assist in the drafting process itself, with the result that we've had more viable proposals produced, and that has in turn reduced the need for an intensive peer review after the completion of the drafting process. Virtually universally, the working relationships between the peer reviewers and the drafters have been very collegial. Where peer reviewers and drafters have been of strongly divergent views, however, the coordinators of drafting and peer review have gotten involved, and we help resolve the conflicts. Once we have an agreed product, we give it a final review and submit it for posting on the LPDD website, which Jordan Gerrard will tell you about in a moment. We also keep our outreach team informed of the proposals which are in the pipeline and will soon be published. So that's the peer review process. So if you have expertise in any of these numerous areas, please bring your expertise and join us. I'm now going to turn it over to Carla Perry, who is the CEO of the Spectrum Group and one of our outreach team members, and she's going to explain that process to you. Carla?
Hi, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm actually just a member of the Spectrum Group. I'm an environmental attorney. I work in DC and I've worked on legislation for over 30 years. Joe DeMona leads the outreach team. He's a New York attorney, and Joel Stromberg with a JBS Group, another DC lawyer with a lot of environmental and energy expertise, rounds out our small team. What's really fun about peer review is we get to talk to everyone, federal, state, and the local level. We talk to the private sector as well, nonprofit groups, and most are pretty enthusiastic about participating. Everyone that we've come in contact with is looking at the climate change issue from whatever perspective they're regulating. The national environmental and policy groups, of course, work with their contacts on Capitol Hill. They're going to feed ideas to the administration. They're aware of the book and the resources, and they're welcome to look at the draft model laws and keep in touch. But we know they are on a different path. It's a lot of the state and local council people that really take advantage of the model laws. They're the ones who are trying to solve these problems at the core level, where they live. and they are very receptive, not only to the model laws, but really teaming up and meeting each other. And so our job is really to make connections. It's not just to find people, but to help them make connections. And by doing so, if legislation is introduced and if traction is needed, we then can reach back to the national groups that may have more staff. We can reach back to some law firms we're in touch with who may have a little bit more political clout and move that through. When Jordan starts talking about the website, you'll see that as we've drafted these model laws, we've categorized them into top 10. Not the top 10 best, but top 10 things you might do, for example, if you wanted electric vehicles. Another top 10 list on energy efficiency. And so what we're trying to do is help people focus, put their arms around this very big animal of climate change and figure out what they can do specifically in their area that they can get past, as Marcy and Rick have said, that will make a difference. Legislation ideally should be bipartisan, so we look for that option. Any state bill that requires money as an outlay is really going to be challenging to pass. We're looking forward to seeing what the federal government's going to do at infrastructure legislation and how that might dovetail with some of our draft model laws. We're also definitely looking at environmental justice issues and job creation. So as the drafters think through how to solve these problems, will they create jobs? If so, what are they going to be and how many? Are there environmental justice issues that should be thought through? And are there options? So we're looking at the whole gamut. We know that the private sector is really committed as well to making a difference. And what we ask is if you have a lot of contacts, if you're involved in the state and local as well as federal legislative process, if you have ideas and are influential and want to help us with some connections, we would really appreciate that. So now I'm going to turn this over to Jordan Gerrard to talk about the website and his participation in the project.
Howdy. My name is Jordan Gerrard. I'm an energy law specialist, mostly in distributed energy and utility reform, and I also do research for and organize the database at lpdd.org. And I'd like to walk you through that. This is lpdd.org, and as John alluded to, everything on this website, first off, it's a large database beyond just the model laws that we've written, thousands of resources along hundreds of pathways. But as John alluded to, they all follow the architecture laid out in this book. So if you go through and go under pathways here, you see these are the umbrella categories for all of the subjects that we address. And they're mostly sectoral. You have buildings, transportation, electricity, fuel, negative emissions, and other non-CO2 pollutants, as well as some cross-cutting issues in context. And so if you were to go through in any of these, you would then swiftly see that our pathways correspond to the actual chapters of the book, chapter 13, chapter 14, etc. So under light duty vehicles, for example, you could find all of the resources that we've researched, but also all of the model laws that folks have written addressing light duty vehicles. So we have a very small number of resources on gas station bans because that's just something that's very new. We have a lot of resources on purchasing electric fleets. We have a lot of resources on expanding charging infrastructure. And wherever we have a model law addressing this, it gets sorted into the appropriate category, but also gets highlighted right here at the top. So you see all of the model laws that our pro bono team has drafted listed here and also cross-listed wherever appropriate. So that's the major architecture without getting too deep into it. We also, of course, have a search function so that you can look at the resources we have by pathway, by jurisdiction, and by location. I'm also going to show you a couple cheat codes to get through the website faster. If you're just interested in looking at the model laws that we ourselves have done, they are, again, all under this model laws tab here at the top. And you can see a little sketch of the same architecture that we have in the book. We have cross-cutting approaches to emissions And then we have, for example, a green bank. We have fuel switching and transportation, and then light duty vehicles. And you see many of the same model laws that you would see going through under pathways. As Carla alluded to, we also, a lot of folks have told us you have a lot of resources and it's hard to know where to start, especially if you're not an expert. We've also drafted some top resource lists that just tackle different subjects. So if you were to go through under light duty vehicles here, you could find what we've identified as our top resources in light duty vehicles. So these are mostly going to be ours, but then you find that we've also identified some that come from other organizations. The last thing I want to highlight on the website, we have all of our contact information here for the appropriate step in the process that you can get involved in. So if you want to get involved in drafting or peer review or outreach, you can find all of us, and the appropriate person is going to be right here for you to come back to. And that is the website. I think with that, I'm turning it over to Julia Kindlin.
I think I'm actually going next. I'm Romany Webb. I'm a research scholar at Columbia Law School and a senior fellow at the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law, where I work on a variety of climate and energy related issues. As I think Marcy alluded to, I co-authored 2 chapters in the Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization book, one on the regulation of methane emissions and a second on the production and delivery of what we called low carbon gaseous fuels. I won't go into the details, but very briefly, the low carbon gaseous fuels chapter looked at legal changes that are needed to facilitate the production and distribution of basically alternatives to fossil natural gas. So things like hydrogen, biogas, and synthetic methane that may need to be used in the future in place of fossil natural gas in some hard to electrify sectors like heavy industry and some transportation. In drafting the chapter, myself and my co-author, Melinda Taylor, who's a professor at the University of Texas, went through quite an extensive research process, and we also consulted quite extensively with relevant interested stakeholders, including scientists that are researching these alternative gaseous fuels, also industry groups that represent the producers of them, pipeline companies and others that are transporting them, and a range of other stakeholders. And we came up with a set of recommendations that we think are very robust and could have real impact. Those recommendations are now being translated into model laws through the LPDD project, which has been really exciting and somewhat gratifying for me to see personally. I now serve as a peer reviewer for the LPDD project. And it's been a really great experience and one that I would recommend to other lawyers who are keen to get involved in the project, but perhaps might not have the capacity or the expertise to actually draft the model laws. Peer review does not require a huge time commitment. Marcy and the team will work with you to set deadlines that fit into your schedule. They'll also work with you to make sure that the model laws you're reviewing are in an area where you already have deep expertise, so you're not expected to sort of learn about a new topic. It's really interesting to see the model laws develop and to have the opportunity to review them. But I think what I value most about the process is the opportunity to network and connect with other lawyers who are really passionate about climate change and addressing it. In my role as peer reviewer, I've got to work with and engage with a number of lawyers who I probably would not have met otherwise, but we have a huge amount in common, and it's been great to get to work with them. One of them is Julia Kindlin, who is an associate at Arnold & Porter in the New York office. So she's going to speak next.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm going to talk briefly about my experience working on this project. I learned that Arnold & Porter was involved in this project sometime during my first few weeks at the firm. I had really wanted to get involved in environmental pro bono work, so I jumped at the opportunity to work on drafting model climate laws. I was given a summary of the book with the key recommendations pulled out and got to choose from some of the available chapters, and I chose Romany's biogas chapter. And I was placed on a team with another associate and a partner at the firm who were also interested in this project. And it was a great opportunity to meet new people that I wouldn't normally have a chance to work with. We were actually all in different practice groups at the firm, but just wanted to do some climate pro bono work. And honestly, none of us really knew anything about biogas going into this project. We just read the chapter we were provided and chose which recommendations sounded the most interesting. And it was really exciting to be able to learn about a new topic and dive into a specific area. And one of the great things about this project is there's a lot of support. So Rick sent us some background materials that had already been gathered on this chapter. And we also got the opportunity to have a phone call with Ramani and ask her all of our questions. And that was really exciting because it's not all that often as a young lawyer that you get a chance to just read something and then call the author and expert and just chat with them about the material. And she was also able to pass along a bit more background information for us that was very useful in drafting the chapter. And so the first step in drafting was sending Rick a template, kind of outlining which recommendation we were choosing, what the final product we would be creating would be, what materials we would be working off of, and when we plan to get him the final draft. And that is another perk of the project, is you get to set your own deadline and can make this project work with whatever your schedule is. And so Rick reviewed the template to make sure we were on the right track, and we got to drafting. I worked on a model law for creating a renewable portfolio standard for renewable gas, and there had been a proposed bill in California on this issue, so I was able to use that as a basis for my model law and incorporate other research and feedback I got from Ramani and my team. Then the draft got sent for peer review, and I got another round of feedback and was able to check in with everyone again. And when the draft was then finalized, you get another chance to to review and give final approval before it then gets published on the website, and you get to see your name up there with everyone else. And so it was a really exciting opportunity to be able to help with climate-specific pro bono work it seems like it's something that'll actually be useful at the state and national level. I think even more exciting now than when I originally got started on this over a year ago, since it looks like the new administration will thankfully focus more on climate change. But overall, it's a really great project that I would highly recommend to anyone. It's especially great project as a young lawyer because you get the opportunity to take responsibility for something and take the lead on a project while still having a great support system filled with all of these experts who are there to assist you. And with that, I can pass it back to Rick to wrap us up.
Well, thank you. I would just end by saying if you have an interest either in drafting, peer review, or outreach, contact us. The contact information is on the website. Feel free to reach out to me, richard.horsch@gmail.com or rhorsch@whitecase.com, either one. And we look forward to hearing hopefully from you and getting you involved. Gayatri, I'll turn it over to you in case there are questions.
Perfect. One of the questions that I get asked frequently is there are those who would like to participate in the program, but in anonymity. So how would that work?
If we do have a number of lawyers and primarily law firms who want to get involved in the project, but because of, frankly, the sensitive nature of climate change and possibly their client base, they would like to do the work, but not have their name associated with the project, and that is absolutely fine. All you need to do is make that request, and we will honor it scrupulously. Again, a firm will check their conflicts, make sure there is no conflict, a business conflict, but decide that, again, we just don't want our name out there and associated with climate change work, either because of clients or because a particular partner in the firm has a particular political view that you don't want to upset the apple cart. We're fine to deal with that. I don't know, Marcy, did you want to add anything to that? You and I both
Sure.
deal with those issues on a fairly regular basis.
That's right. Some of the peer reviewers have not wanted to be identified also. And we actually have worked with people to find a middle ground. I mean, Rick helps drafters find an area in which to draft that doesn't compete with their firm's clients, for example. So that has worked out well for some firms. Other folks don't want their names attached to the particular proposal they worked on, proud as they are to have contributed, but they would like their name listed on the website as somebody who participates in the project. And Jordan has been able to satisfy the needs of those people as well. So, you know, we can work with you in whatever iteration works for you.
Yeah, let me just add, I emphasize what Marcy has said. We're very flexible. If you're concerned about conflicts, what we found is with some 1,500 recommendations and more than 35 different topics, nearly all firms have been able to select a recommendation that doesn't pose a conflict. So if you represent a fossil fuel company, you're obviously not going to take on phasing out fossil fuels, but a recommendation relating to carbon capture and sequestration or carbon negative technology or energy efficiency may fit well with your client base. Again, nearly every firm who has wanted to participate has been able to select a recommendation or recommendations that fit well with their client base and avoid conflicts.
So we have another question from, this was from Dr. Whitefeather, and wanted to know about what happens with tribal relations. How would we include tribal relations?
Marcy, do you want to address that?
Yeah, thank you. I am the chair now emerita of the New York State Chief Judge's Committee on Tribal Courts and the convener emerita of the New York Federal State Court, Federal State Tribal Courts and Indian Nations Justice Forum. Actually, we're having our semi-annual meeting tomorrow. And this is a group of representatives of the New York State courts, representatives of the federal courts from the Second Circuit that are resident in New York, and representatives of the 9 state or federally recognized tribal nations within the boundaries of New York. And we work together to reduce jurisdictional conflict and promote understanding. I don't have a ready answer to Dr. Whitefeather's question, except I would say that we would be glad to work with representatives of tribal nations or people from the tribal nations who don't necessarily represent the tribal nation itself, and in any way that you would like to plug into our project. If we can, we have not yet had occasion to draft any proposals that might be adopted by a tribal council, if that's what you mean. But I would defer to Michael and John and Rick, but I think we would not be averse to trying to work with you on something like that. I don't know if you've seen the book itself, but take a look. If you haven't, take a look at it, or at least the summary version that you can obtain without charge. It's also available digitally, of course. And if there are proposals there that you think would be useful to try to adapt for proposing to tribal nations government, I'd be very excited to work with you on that, and I'm sure my colleagues here would as well. But if I'd misunderstood your question, please correct me.
Let me just say I absolutely agree with that. There are a number of recommendations that are in the book that might well be quite relevant to tribal councils, such as the siting of renewables, electric vehicle charging stations, lots of others. And we'd love to work with people who are interested in drafting language that would be suitable for tribal councils.
And I want to mention that we're working with the Legal Justice Coalition and the Rising Voices Community Relocation and Site Expansion Work Group as one of our outreach groups. And they are trying to be a liaison to some of the tribal groups and indigenous people who are worried about losing their homes due to climate change. So if we get your contact information, we can provide more data on that as well.
And let me just say that if you reach out to me, I am happy to send either you or anybody a list of all the recommendations, either organized by chapter and I have a separate list organized by actor, which means federal, state, county, local, as opposed to chapter. So if you reach out to me, I can send you that information. I've had a number of requests for those recommendations, and people then sort through them and decide, what makes sense and what they want to draft. But, for your request, it may be what may be appropriate to adopt at the tribal level, and I'm happy to do that. And if anybody needs more information or just can't figure out how to get in touch with others, I'm happy to put you in touch with whomever on the project. So please do reach out, and we look forward to hearing from you.
So just to continue, so Dr. Whitefeather, so he said, yes, he was co-counsel with 122 tribes and individual members that have good knowledge of these topics. So maybe we can make a connection there. So an additional question that had come through earlier is in relation to just all of the things that are coming in with the U.S. administration and, say, the infrastructure bill, what do you see are the intersects?
Michael, do you want to answer that one, or John?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the chapter on siting of renewable energy facilities, which I wrote, several of the recommendations are the sort of things that the Biden administration is actually doing in terms of expediting the, for instance, the approval of offshore wind projects. So there's a lot of intersect between what we're doing and what the Biden administration is actually doing, which is quite gratifying to see.
The thing I would add is that there's still a big need to do legal work at the state and local level and in the private sector, as well as, I think, at the federal level on issues that the Biden administration may not now be currently prioritizing. There's for those of you who work in the area know this well, there are a boatload of issues that pretty much only local governments or states or even the private sector can really address. And so having a supportive Biden administration is not a substitute for action at these other levels.
I want to share a comment that was made earlier. It was a recommendation for Rick, and add to outreach government workers on the federal, state, and local levels. There may be conflicts of interest to be considered, but such expertise should not be ruled out entirely.
We're happy to talk to any federal workers that have expertise, especially policy expertise. And again, if they contact us through the website, we can certainly chat with them. The way outreach works is really it's making connections, and from those connections we get other connections. So happy to do whatever with the federal workers that are interested.
And we have, as I said, used government employees as peer reviewers too, in situations where it did not present a conflict with their official duties. So we welcome your input.
Well, that actually brings us to another question, just talking a little bit more about conflicts of interest. So how are you dealing with attorneys and firms that are worried about conflicts of interest?
I think step one for a firm that is interested but may have a concern about conflicts would be to, I'm happy to send you again a list of recommendations and the topics in the book. And what we do is most firms work through and select a particular topic or recommendation that is consistent with their client base or not inconsistent, right? Is not going to create a conflict. There's kind of two issues there. There are a number of firms who have reached out and said, we do a lot of work in renewable energy. It really fits well with our client base. Here's here's the kind of recommendations and topics we're looking for, and that's fine. They can take that and run with it. Others have said, we represent a major oil company. I get that. I'm fine with that. But they don't want to, obviously cannot take on something, as I said, phasing out fossil fuels. So if that's the case, there are topics and recommendations that you can work with. There's plenty out there. Carbon capture and sequestration is entirely consistent with what most oil companies, oil production, exploration, or even refining companies are looking at. They're putting money into it, entirely consistent. Carbon negative technology, the same thing. So bottom line, lots of recommendations on a number of broad matters, and there's something here, I think, that fits every firm's client base and will not create a conflict. And again, let me just emphasize that even if you think, okay, there's no conflict, but we don't want our client's sensitive issue to raise issues, we still want to do the work. It's exciting work. It's good for young lawyers. It's good for summer associates. It provides a great opportunity for lawyers to do something they don't often do, which is draft laws. So if you want to do that and still, you can do it anonymously. We, a number of firms will do the work and say, hey, we just don't want our name associated. Life's too short. We don't want to create, we don't want to raise questions. Clearly no conflict, but we just, as a matter of course, we want to do it anonymously. So, Gayatri, those are sort of the levels that we deal with on a fairly regular basis. We work with firms to to accommodate them and satisfy their client base.
So here's one more question. So for those who wondering how they might be able to participate in the peer review process, do you need to be an attorney? Is this something that can be shared with other organizations or perhaps clients who might have a particular expertise?
The short answer to the first part of the question is you do not have to be an attorney to be a peer reviewer. We have peer reviewers who've been active with us and whose work is on the website now, who are economists, or they're engineers, or they're entrepreneurs, or they're venture capitalists. Whatever expertise you bring is what the value is, and it's certainly not restricted to attorneys. We also have had occasion, in fact, we're underway in a peer review of one particular proposal, two actually, right now, that have been fully peer reviewed by an expert from a not-for-profit that does climate advocacy, also peer reviewed by someone who used to work for the Environmental Protection Agency, and it has just been sent to someone at who's a PhD in I'm not sure, some sort of scientific field, who is reviewing the chemical aspects and the standards that we've included in the proposal. So it really refines, everybody bringing their own expertise helps refine our product and makes everything much more viable, and gives us a much greater success. So, whatever your expertise is in, I'd be glad to talk to you and make you number 41 on our list of peer reviewers.
Excellent. So we have about 5 more minutes in sort of our hallway side chat. One more question. So in terms of raising awareness, how can folks help raise awareness if they are unable to have the pro bono piece approved by their firm?
I think to the peer review team, and we can assist in working with you anonymously to understand who your contacts and resources might be. Rick, I'm sorry, did you have something else?
No. I'll follow up if you. I'll follow up what you say. If why don't you complete what you were talking about?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what we do from the peer review team is you have a couple paragraphs that people can put in a newsletter, a firm-wide email, if they're part of an organization, a professional organization, working through them, put information in there about, outreach. And again, we're trying to constantly make connections and then connect our connections and really see if we can get momentum, because the whole point of drafting the model legislation and really giving people not only a scholarly but just well done, background piece to go with it is to get it enacted. It's to help state and local legislators, successfully move the needle forward.
Good, and I will just follow up briefly, Carla. Thank you. In addition to working with Carla on outreach, if your firm can't get it approved by your firm and you can't officially work on it, I would suggest the following steps. One, continue to review the website. We send out a newsletter every month. Continue to think about this project. Let other firms know about it. I'm sure you're dealing with lawyers and other firms, and if they have interest in climate change work or doing pro bono work, let them know. Just help us get the word out. No conflict. There should be no conflict in doing that, no matter what your client base. And I would just keep aware of it, follow the project, and if things change, either your firm decides, there's no longer a conflict, or they now want to get involved, or you move to another firm, or you go into, go in-house. At that point, it may be appropriate to get involved and reach out to us at that time. We'd love to get you involved. I have had a young associate at a major firm in San Francisco who did a terrific job working with one of the chapter authors in drafting a very significant bill. He then left the firm for other reasons and is now with a company, and he's continued to work with us. So keep us in mind, get the word out, and at the appropriate time, come back to us, and hopefully we can work with you.
And we have just yesterday on the subject of outreach, we have a new outreach video soliciting folks to help work with us. So if you'd just like us to help fan the flames, we can give you some text, or we can send you a video.
All right, excellent. Before I let all of you go, one question. I think it'd be great if you could just reiterate or just restate what areas are you looking for expertise in right now, or for assistance?
That is a very broad question, and I would answer it this way. There are 35 different topics. Michael and John have described those topics. There are 1,500 recommendations. Even if a particular chapter has been claimed by a firm, there is room to get involved in that particular area. So the answer to the question is, take a look at the website, take a look at the book. If there is a particular area, I would turn the question around. What is your interest? What is your area of expertise? Does it fit within any of the 35 or more topic areas? If so, get in touch with us. I'm sure there's a recommendation within that area that we can get you involved in. Drafters have approached it in a couple of ways. I've seen drafters say, this is my area of expertise. This is what I'd like to do, renewables, let's say. And then we get them involved in a recommendation from the renewable space. Another approach has been, and I think it's the one Julia mentioned, which is gee, I kind of know something about this, right? I know something about distributed energy, but I really want to do a deep dive into it and really become smarter about it. This is a great opportunity to do that. And again, choose a recommendation from that particular area. We'll put you in touch with the chapter author if they're willing to discuss it. We'll give you other information. It allows you to do a deep dive and really develop your expertise in an area that you may not already have expertise in. So those are a couple of the approaches that firms and lawyers have taken. So again, you tell me what you're interested in, and we'll find recommendations that work. We're focusing mostly on state, local, and cities as opposed to federal, but there's still room at the federal level, as John mentioned.
All right, excellent. Are there any other last remarks for our attendees before we close? All right, well, I want to thank all of you for attending today, and I want a big thank you for our panelists, for all of you for explaining this project, and we're hoping that we get a lot of participants to help in drafting and providing all of that peer review. I will make sure that everyone has the contact information, and if any of you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. All right, thanks everyone.